and welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Grace.
And I'm Sierra. Today marks our first Recess Digest episode, where we aim to share with you some helpful tips and research snapshots in the time it would take for you to eat your recess. We are, as always, accompanied by freshly made cups of tea, which we hope will still be warm by the time we finish.
And because we have limited time, let's get right into it. Today's inaugural Recess Digest is all about the habits of mind, which you may or may not have heard of. They are 16 habits or patterns of behaviour that contribute to effective problem solving and creative thinking. For those of you who are unaware of these, here's just a quick background of where they came from and why they're awesome. So this guy called Art Costa in 1981 wrote a book called Intelligent Behaviours, and he debuted these 16 habits of mind, which he thought were dispositions that all good learners possess. And since 1981, he has collaborated with two women, Benna Kalik and Alison Zmuda, which is a fantastic last name, and they have created what's literally called the Institute for Habits of Mind. And basically, flexible, adaptable, creative thinkers will think in these 16 different ways. We're not going to get into all of them in this quick episode, but what I personally find really valuable about the habits of mind is that they are truly universal and transferable across all disciplines, careers, vocations, learning contexts, whatever. And from my experience already, the school that I teach at uses these as kind of our theoretical framework. And from my experience this year, they really do enable you to become a truly intelligent individual in life generally, not just in an academic context. So in a way, they almost like teach you common sense. They teach you how to be a productive, helpful human being, really.
And are they the type of thing that you can teach people to do?
We have literally done some professional development as a staff on that very thing. So yes, you can. And just to very quickly kind of answer that question, basically what this session of PD was about using some kind of relevant content or subject matter to use as kind of the lens through which you focus on a particular habit of mind. So this staff meeting was amazing because our Director of Teaching and Learning has recently gotten into physical culture, or Fizzy, and she taught us all how to do a Fizzy march, which is a very specific way of walking, to teach us the habit of mind of striving for accuracy, because there's lots of different parts of a Fizzy march that you need to focus on at the same time. And so she used that as the content, but the focus really was on striving for accuracy, which is one of the habits. And it was really entertaining. And every time I think of striving for accuracy now, I think of Fizzy, which I've never done in my life. But that
I did for a little while when
Oh!
I was very little.
Oh, yes.
There's some hilarious photos of me in a swimsuit instead of a leotard doing some Fizzy. And I have a 4th place award, but there was only 4 of us.
Oh, that is just delightful. That is amazing. That's definitely my glow for this week, that I know this information about you. Right. So we're just going to look at 2 habits of mind in this episode. The first of which is persisting, which I mistakenly taught to my kindergarten children as persevere. So instead of chanting persisting, they will now chant persevere. They are the same thing, but I was not striving for accuracy in that moment, as you can tell. Anyway, this habit of mind is obviously about, it literally says right here in this document I'm referring to, persisting is persevering in a task. There you go. Basically, you don't give up. This, the document to which I refer is the official teacher's guide to the habits of mind from the Institute for Habits of Mind, which we will link in our show notes. Super helpful. It's just got 1 page on each of the habits, but it says down the bottom, remember the little engine that could. So cute. I think I can. Honestly is a huge barrier to lots of students learning from my limited experience and my own learning too. We were talking about self-efficacy, which is one of our favourite terms on Teaching Together. And this is really about self-efficacy and building that sense of don't give up just because it's hard from the very first second. Like, you need to give it a go. Like, The things that are worth it in your education and in life generally are going to require a little bit of effort, I'm sorry to say, 5-year-old that I teach. So you will need to persist and persevere.
Mm. There was at a school I've worked at before, they often used a phrase like um, learning is challenging, but people meet the challenge at different like points on the learning journey.
Yeah.
So if it's not that some people find learning easy and some people find learning hard, um, but at some level, at some point, if you're actually learning something, you'll be met with a challenge.
And that's exactly what the habits of mind are about. They are basically saying that these kinds of dispositions are actually teachable. It's like a nature versus nurture kind of thing. The habits of mind comes from a philosophy that to a certain extent learning is nurturable. You
Mm-hmm.
can nurture it and you can teach it. And we've done lots of talking in our staff meetings about modeling these habits of mind in our own thinking and talking out loud with students and how we approach things. Um, and I will give a short example of my beautiful class. We were exploring 3D objects last week, and I gave my kiddos a bunch of paddle pop sticks and some blue tack at the end of our exploration, at the end of the week of looking at 3D objects, and told them, make some for me. And this beautiful boy was just having a lot of trouble getting his cube to stand up. It was just because I don't know if the blue tack was not great or whatever, but it just wasn't staying together. And he only has 2 hands and his hands are little and he needed some help. And I saw it fall down like 4 different times. And then he finally said, I was actually really proud of him because he didn't give up straight away. He loves to give up straight away, but he kept going. But then he just was like, Miss Keane, I just can't. He literally said, I quit, I give up. And then I said, no, we need to persevere. We need to persist and we need to keep going. And the kids were like, what does persevere mean? And so I was like, when things get difficult or tricky, as we say, because we're 6, you keep going. And then because my children are so beautiful and enthusiastic, they started to chant, persevere, persevere. And so now I cannot say that word without them starting to chant it. But honestly,
So delightful.
it is pretty delightful. If I'm going to indoctrinate them with anything, it should be perseverance, right?
should,
And
it
this
should.
child did eventually make his cube. I did help him because he had been persevering for like 4 separate times and it kept falling apart on him. And I wanted him to experience some success. But it does say on our document that we're referring to that perseverance may include seeking assistance from others. So I thought, look, I can help him. And he did finish his cube. I took a photo, put it on Seesaw. He looks very proud. I was proud of him. It was a whole thing. And now we have something to refer to in the future when similar instances occur where I can just say, persevere. And all the kids know exactly what I'm talking about. There's a clear example that the whole class kind of experienced, even though it was this one child's cube. And it was just, it's one of the probably I would consider most important habits, even though they're all amazing and they're so rich, which is why we're talking about it first. Because if you persist, then it creates the opportunity to exercise all these other habits of mind. If you don't persist, if you just give up, then your learning stops.
Mm. I mean, I talk a lot about problem solving in my subject area, and this really goes hand in hand with that because if you, um, well, what these guys are basically saying is that all of these habits are common in creative, flexible, problem solving type thinkers. But one way that I often try to celebrate persistence and problem solving in my classroom is if I've just got 2 or 3 minutes at the end of a lesson, instead of just I don't know, letting everyone sort of pack up and stand quietly and wait for the bell or whatever, I will actually ask a student to share like a problem that they had in that lesson and how they went about trying to fix that and how they had to persevere through that. Um, Not because I'm particularly working through these habits of mind, because that's um, Grace is actually teaching me about these and it's fantastic, but because I do value persistence and we know that it's essential if we want students to be creative thinkers and sort of take a bit more responsibility for their own learning. And so I think that's also one way that other students can seek assistance and input from others, which is the advice given by these guys, because when they see other students who were able to persist through something and the strategies that they tried to use to navigate the problem. It gives them ideas for how they might go about the problem if they face it, or who they might seek assistance from and input from. And I often have to differentiate for my students what's the difference between helping someone and doing it for them. That's always hard. And even for me as a teacher, sometimes like time pressures and stress and other things, it can be easy to just sort of, especially in a practical setting, just like, oh, let me show you how to do that. And you just kind of end up doing most of it for them. But I do try and be really aware of that, because I don't want students to think that seeking assistance is just having someone do it for you. But there are useful ways for them to, support each other as peers, and for me to support them as a teacher.
Yeah, 100%. Just ditto all of that. And a thought that I also had just about the habits of mind in general is they're really useful in giving a common vocabulary that we can use to articulate these kinds of dispositions. Like you were just saying, Sierra, how like you don't talk about habits of mind at your school, but you do talk about persisting and persevering. Like it's just good to have that kind of vocabulary to say, this is concrete and tangible. And we can kind of give form to this vague idea, abstract concept of something. I think they're super helpful.
Agree.
And then the next one we're going to look at today is managing impulsivity, which has become a bit of a punchline in the junior school at my place of employment, because we have lots of young'uns who just cannot manage their impulsivity. And in terms of like primary school age children, it's a lot of calling out and just reacting in really silly ways and just literally doing whatever comes to their mind without thinking about it first.
For high school students, I think often one of the biggest impulse problems I see is just like them just going for their phones, or just like they might be on their laptops. Just let me open a tab and check what the basketball score is, because over in America, they're playing basketball in the middle of the day when we're trying to do our learning. And I never knew that the NBA had such a hold on the teenagers of today in Australia. But there you go. And that for me is probably more of the impulse issues that I face. Like, and I get it. You know, if my phone's on the desk, I will pick it up and look at it without thinking sometimes when I'm trying to work and do other things. So helping students to navigate that sort of impulse is probably one of my biggest challenges.
Yeah. And what is the similar case with a lot of these habits of mind is that they are kind of self-explanatory. When you think about it, you're like, well, yeah, that makes sense. You need to persist to finish a hard task. You do need to manage your impulsivity so that you remain focused and actually see a task through to the end. And when it comes to problem solving, which is kind of the context a lot of these habits are framed around, some of the things they mentioned in this document from the Institute are that, for example, you might misread directions and kind of just jump in thinking you know what the task is, and then you do the wrong thing, which we've definitely seen in students. Or they give an example of just saying the first thing that comes to your mind, and then you're like, oh, wait a second, actually that came out wrong, or I misread the situation, or whatever. Just because our brain loves to jump to conclusions. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but from my armchair, I can armchair psychologize from what I've heard on other podcasts. Our brain loves to assume things and kind of fill in the gaps and just operate as efficiently as possible. But often that will lead to misinterpretations or misunderstandings or just straight up missing information. And we need to manage our impulsivity and actually take the time to figure out what it is that I'm being asked to do, or what the situation is that I am contributing to, or what the discussion is, or whatever. Just take a second before I jump in. And that's what I love again about the habits of mind, is that you can apply this to the classroom, you can apply this to a conversation with your friends, you can apply this to kind of anything, that generally being a little bit calmer and taking a second to not just do the first thing that comes to mind, unless you're in a life-threatening situation and then your adrenaline takes over and blah, blah, blah. But hopefully we're not in those kind of situations in the classroom. Taking a second just to kind of figure out what's actually going on and thoughtfully consider the best way to go ahead, it can minimize a lot of mistakes that you don't need to make. Like, I'm actually thinking this is kind of a trivial example, but when I play Wordle, I will, because you only have like really 4 or 5 chances before you reach that bottom row. And if you get it wrong on the bottom row, you're out. So I will often go through, without even typing anything in, different possibilities, without just going, oh, I'll just type that in. Oh, that didn't work. I'll type in another one. I am managing my impulsivity by having a think before I even type anything in and eliminating a lot of those errors so that I can win the game. Like, that is an example of managing impulsivity. And it is a completely trivial context. It doesn't matter at all. But I am becoming a better learner because of it.
The Institute suggests some really helpful strategies for how you can assist your students to be more intentional. And one of the first ones it says is to focus on your breathing to settle down. I feel like before you can even do something like that, you have to have some element of self-awareness, like before you just call out, or before you open that tab to check the score, or before you pick up your phone to just do nothing. There has to be some element of, oh, I'm aware of the fact that I'm off track right now. And so obviously having those conversations in your classroom is really helpful, but giving your students strategies for what to do when they notice that they're doing that is really the next step. I love this focus on your breathing one. I guess mindfulness and breathing and those kind of things are becoming more popular, and more people are aware of the benefits of them. And one breathing technique that I learnt at a PD last year, I have used with right up to my 18-year-olds, but you could use it with 5-year-olds. I've used it with like my parents even, and people in my family when things, conversations get a bit heated and I'm like, guys, we need to focus on our breathing. But starfish breathing, have I told you about this?
I've definitely heard of it, but please explain.
Okay, you got to do it with me.
Okay, I'm ready.
So you hold your hand out in like a 5, so it makes like a starfish. And with your other finger, you just trace around your hand.
Oh, yeah, I didn't realize that's what it was called.
But
Yeah.
every time you go up, you breathe in, and every time you go down, you breathe out. So, and kids will often do this really quickly, and you're actually having to try and teach them to like slow down. You want your finger trace to take as long as possible, so you can take a really deep breath and then back down the other side. And like, I have literally used this with year 12 kids when they've come in from a class. Maybe they're stressed or upset about something that's happened at lunch, or about results they got from the class before, and they've walked into my room and they're agitated. And, some of them might think it's a little bit funny or whatever, but they actually do get to the end of it and go, oh, I do feel better now. And so by just calming them and focusing them on their breathing when they first walk in helps to manage impulses that might have happened or might have led to errors or other issues in the rest of that lesson. So that would be one of my top tips for introducing a breathing activity that's like quick, easy. You don't need to, sometimes the box breathing, you can get the box breathing video counters and things like that. It requires no technology. It's just everybody put your hand on the table and trace up and down, and they'll have a bit of a laugh, but maybe the first time you do it, especially if you're doing it with teenagers. But I've honestly found it to be really helpful. And even I do it for myself now when I'm feeling like I'm a little bit agitated.
And it is interesting that a lot of issues we have, especially in my kindergarten classroom, a lot of issues I have result from kids or myself acting before we think. And it really literally just takes however long it takes you to get through all 5 of your fingers to do this starfish breathing. That's as long as it takes just to give you that bit of clarity and go, actually, I don't need to whack the person in front of me in the face because they did something that wasn't even that terrible to me. Like I saw it happen today. And I was just like, darling, why?
Other strategies it suggests is rewinding the situation to examine it. So maybe even if you notice a student who is acting impulsively, rewind with them so that you're teaching them how to rewind individually. Like Grace said before, the best way that we can show kids how to use these habits of mind is also by modeling them ourselves. And we know that sort of thinking out loud is a way that we can model for our students' thought processes. And so maybe you need to rewind through a situation with them to help them reflect on what, where, and why something happened to cause them to act a bit impulsively.
another piece of advice from this document is kind of like what I was saying with my Wordle example. It just suggests to think about what actions you could take and what possible advantages or disadvantages might happen as a result. So just doing like a hypothetical, if I did this, this might happen. If I do this, this might happen. Which one am I going to pick? Rather than just whacking your friend in the face and then suffering the consequences. You could consider, what would happen if I didn't whack my friend in the face? Oh my goodness, let's not do that. And then the last one is reframing possibilities. I feel like reframing possibilities and considering your options are quite similar in terms of just take a breath before you do anything and consider what happens if I do this? Bad. What happens if I do this? Good. Let's do the good one. And of course, obviously, not every single situation is going to be fixed by 2 seconds of breathing and is going to have one bad option and one good option.
No.
But this kind of thinking in those kind of basic situations will hopefully train you into a habit, which is why it's called a habit of mind, that you then rely on automatically in those more complex situations.
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's really essential because, not everything is black and white, especially when you're dealing with people and groups and classrooms and dynamics and all of those different things. But some of these strategies seem like it requires sort of an element of perception and, I guess, engagement from the student for them to be able to do that. Like these aren't just strategies that you can say, oh, do this. And if they choose not to think like that, well, that's not going to be beneficial for them. But I really do think, modeling through and trying to talk through with students, especially if you have students who are struggling with impulse issues, rather than, I guess, maybe there being a negative conversation about, well, why did you do that? Sometimes those conversations still need to be had, but using some of these strategies to help assist them to, especially, I really like the rewind one. Like, let me think through what led up to that situation. Rewind with them, help them consider other options, even if this is in retrospect, because by going through options later, maybe they'll feel like they have more options the next time they feel that impulse.
Yeah, you're trying to build up a toolbox of strategies that you can use in any kind of situation. And that's why these habits are so generic, because they're designed to be used in kind of any situation.
Well, there you go. There's our 2 habits of mind. And I have reached the bottom of my cup. So we look forward to going through more of these habits with you over the coming weeks. But for now, that's all from us.
Find us on all the socials. Give us a review because we love those. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.